Good afternoon to you. Mark Stott of HurricaneTrack.com back in Wilmington, North Carolina. It is Wednesday now, the 10th day. Yes, November 10th, 2021. I was out on the Outer Banks for a few days. Coastal storm went by after giving Florida a lot of rough weather in the previous few days before it made its way into the southwest Atlantic. And then extra high tides for Georgia, the Carolinas, and then overwashing the Outer Banks. And this is all typical, generally, and expected. Now, some of these high tides were pretty atypical, but it's not like this is an unusual event. We get these coastal storms, these non-tropical systems that are all kind of part of a front. But again, the effects are the same. You get some high surf, overwash, flooding, coastal flooding, high winds, and in some cases, mainly down in Florida, you guys had some heavy rain. Not a lot of rain in eastern North Carolina with this system, as I saw in person for the 4 days that I was up along the Outer Banks. So here I am. It's time for the Hurricane Outlook and discussion. So let's take a look at what's happening out there. The first stop today, the anomalies map, and this is really, really interesting. The La Nina very strong in the tropical Pacific here. Wow, very, very prominent. And then look how warm the Atlantic basin is, the North Atlantic. I mean, that really sticks out. We're talking about most of the areas in here. If you just look at the different pixel colors, 1, maybe 2 degrees Celsius. I mean, we can just be conservative and say that most of the North Atlantic is close to a degree Celsius warmer than average. Most of the main development region is about 1/4 of a degree, just looking at this particular data set. And then down here near the equator, opposite of what we're seeing in the tropical Pacific here, the tropical Atlantic along the equatorial region, again, close to 1 Celsius, maybe more, above the long-term average. So a lot of energy stored in that warm water. It's anomalously warm. It's warmer than it should be based on our perception of that, keeping records and such. And then you juxtapose that to the Pacific, contrast it to the Pacific there, where it's much colder than average. Around that ribbon you see there those interesting waves. Instability, it's kind of like the way air will just move across. Well, water is just a thick version of the air, in case you didn't know. It's a very interesting part of hydrodynamics, how all of that works. And the end result, the La Nina in the Pacific will have a big impact on global weather. The very warm Atlantic will have an impact as well, and it's going to drive storms. It might not be hurricanes right now. Hurricane season technically still going on, but for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much over. Yes, we could still have something develop anywhere out here. And that's what that Orange X is all about. That is 96L, 50% chance of becoming a subtropical storm. I am of the opinion that it was close yesterday, maybe even made it, but that's not my call. I'm entitled to my opinion, from what I know about tropical meteorology and the atmosphere. I'll show you some evidence about that. And we'll see. Maybe they go back and look at it in hindsight and say, oh, yep, it was a subtropical storm. But whatever. Those are just, again, labels that we humans assign things to keep up with them. The point is, it's a large storm force, non-tropical area of low pressure that has a brief period here where it could become more subtropical in nature. It's just a little bit more concentrated than it is now. It wouldn't be attached to a frontal boundary. It would be its own entity generating its own heat and condensation. The release of that condensation releases heat. Condensation is a warming process. It's all structure. It's all classification, again, from a science perspective. But for people, ships out there, the maritime interest, it's a problem. It's generating rough seas. It generated in the past rough seas and inclement weather for the west coast, the east coast, all along this area with coastal flooding. We already talked about that. You saw, hopefully, some of my cams I had set up and some of the different videos that were shared on social from all kinds of folks. This was a big impact system overall, causing damage, causing disruption. Weddings this weekend, you name it. This past weekend, I know of a couple people that were in touch with me. Hey, I got a wedding. What's going to happen? Yes, these storms do have impacts. They have consequences, and we got to be aware of them. So here it is on the true color or natural color, as Levi Cowan, Dr. Cowan labels it here, from the always awesome tropicaltidbits.com. And let's switch this over to a white telestration if we can. There's the system. There's the front. It still has that conveyor belt. That's a good term that David Roth No, he is not a singer for Van Halen. That was David Lee Roth, right? I just snuck that in. Perfect, right? No, David Roth is a scientist, and he terms this a conveyor belt, and it's still attached to that conveyor belt, and that's a front, that's a boundary, and it's got to detach from that, and then it becomes its own entity, and it's worthy of the name. And I agree with that. I think that makes sense. You can look at this meteorologically and say it doesn't quite fit the classification, but again, this is what scientists do. They pigeonhole stuff to keep up with what's what. It's still a big ocean storm, and it's darn near hurricane force out there. Some of the data was showing that, and I'll point that out to you in just a moment. This is also of interest, a mid-latitude cyclone that's going to bring some severe weather potential for our friends in Oklahoma over the next several hours, so I'll take a look at that in just a moment here. First, close up, yes, there is some fairly deep convection considering how far north this is, over the North Atlantic, roughly mid-North Atlantic if you want to call it that. But it still has that conveyor belt, as David Roth says, not David Lee Roth, but and some thunderstorms. Look, there's some lightning out there in that frontal boundary. So yes, there's still a boundary or a front around, and so it's not quite subtropical. Now over at Storm 2K, these folks are on top of it. And I love that. I can go back and see what I might have missed because I was very busy these last couple of days. And yes, it got designated as an invest yesterday. And different people have different things that they put with memes or whatever. But all in all, it's really neat to be able to just come through and see. There's satellite animations from yesterday. It looked really healthy yesterday, zoomed in, but it still had that front. It was still kind of attached to that. By the way, that is Bermuda. This is yesterday. But that's Bermuda, in case you're wondering. And different things that people were observing. Some of it was very helpful. Look at this. This is the ASCAT. This is a scatterometer satellite product that uses different microwave technology to get a good gauge of the wind. And looking at the color scale, some of these were looking like maybe upwards of 60 knots. Some of those flags down there, 45, 55, 60 knots. There's a few oranges in there. Maybe a little bit of an argument to be made that it was close to hurricane force. A non-tropical hurricane force low. Just terms we use. But yeah, this is what it was looking like yesterday. This gentleman here, I know him personally as a professional meteorologist. And, he's right about this. It's subtropical. It has nothing to do with how strong it is. And it has everything to do with the fact that it is still attached to a cold front. And therefore, its future doesn't have much of a future, and it may or may not get named, whatever. This is today. People posting today 45 to 50 knots. It looked like 40 to 50 knots. It's over here in the corner that the scatterometer picked it up. It's the way it orbits across the planet, or at least high up in space, right? And you get these little swaths of data, and it captured it real well right here earlier today. And again, some of that was showing up, maybe 40 to 50 knots. So it's cranking along, but it's just not quite worthy of the name Adria, which would be the first name on the auxiliary list. We no longer do the alpha, beta, delta, gamma, whatever. See, that's why I couldn't even keep up with it myself. Alpha, beta, delta, gamma, right? Gamma, delta, whatever. There was some lightning with it, though. You can see that earlier today near some core thunderstorms. I just think it's fascinating. This system gave us a lot of inclement weather for millions of people, and now it's sitting over the Atlantic, and it is tagged as an invest, as you can see there, like we talked about. So we'll see what happens. Maybe in postseason analysis, they go back and say, okay, for 6 hours it was detached from the front enough. Whatever. Let's just move on, shall we? I'm sure you're saying the same thing. So the GFS, it analyzes it pretty well. There it is in the 12Z model from today. But still, there's that front, a little bit of that conveyor belt that we talked about from Mr. Roth, right? There it is. You can see it showing up, the vorticity even. And there's a lot of different ways to look at this. There's thermal profiles, humidity values, and just different structural pieces of the puzzle. But this part of the GFS, 850 millibars up, the geopotential, or cyclonic vorticity as it is, relative vorticity, is important. And it shows up nicely, and there you go. So let's move this out into time, see what happens with it. It moves along, maybe right there. This is 12 hours out, so this will be this evening. it detaches from the front just enough to become subtropical storm Adria. All right, I'll let it go. So then also you see this front moving through here. There you go. There's some energy in the Great Plains. Nothing down in the tropics. We're pretty much done. So we'll talk about some things related, like sea surface temperatures, El Nino, La Nina, whatever. But we're going to focus more and more on lower 48 weather, other big-ticket weather items. And this one looks like it could be a big-ticket weather item for some areas. I'll show you that in just a moment. With a tweet from Tomer Berg. But that moves through big upper-level energy over Canada with some lowering of the heights here, kind of troughiness over the east coast. Big fat ridge over the central Atlantic. So a return to colder for the eastern part of the United States here after about day 3. To get to that point, you got to have this. A battle of the air masses will ensue, and Oklahoma and very large hail will be in the same sentence. Yep, Storm Prediction Center mentioning this today. Could be problematic, especially the hail. The high thunderstorm tops creating that hail. This is the area outlined. Be sure to visit the SPC site, spc.noaa.gov, or follow them on Twitter. Right there, Storm Prediction Center. Or, simple too, Tomer, he's good student there, going back to the Northeast to finish everything up. He's tweeting about that recently. Smart kid, smart young man. That's why I follow him. Good stuff. Thanks for pointing this out, Mr. Berg. Now we are aware. All right, so I talked about this last week, I think. We're doing a fundraiser, fun with no D, a fundraiser for a mountain bike. No, just kidding. We're actually doing well with this. People have contributed. They crowdfund. Everything I do is crowdfunded. It's, well, almost everything. I do license my video in full disclosure exclusively to the Weather Channel. They are the only news outlet that gets to use my video on a national scale, and they pay for it. And they do right by me, as they say. Other than that, there's no corporate sponsors. There's, I don't work at wherever. GE here in Wilmington, we have a GE or Corning, or I'm not a doctor that has a lot of money that goes and does this stuff as a hobby. It is entirely a crowd-funded project, with the exception of some additional income, of course, from the Weather Channel, as I mentioned. And it has grown substantially. And I'm proud to say that. I'm not bragging. I'm extremely honored. And we have been able to do a lot. And in that few years that it has really blossomed. I mean, I've done this for 2 decades. It's the last 3 years that through Patreon here, this has really grown. And I'm showing you this post from a few days ago. We're trying to crowdfund a vehicle. Now, it'd be great to buy the entire vehicle, sure, and it's up to you guys. And so one of our supporters, Karen, had the idea of just kind of showing some of the, make it fun. It doesn't have to be all serious and, like it's do or die or whatever. Just make it fun. So we're past the mountain bike, and maybe even up to a compact car where I could put a good amount of money down on one of those. But that's not real practical. So we're trying, maybe not even that, right? This is more realistic. That's a Toyota, right? But we could do a Ford F-150, sure. Maybe a Tundra, maybe a Tacoma. We're not quite sure yet, but people have contributed, and we're getting there. We're making good progress. We've got a little under a week to go. Monday, this coming Monday, that's the deadline. I'll assemble all of the funds that people have donated through PayPal. A couple people have sent a check, and some people have used Venmo. So read this article if you're interested. You don't have to be a, quote, patron to participate. People watching on YouTube, Twitter, elsewhere, doesn't matter. Anybody can be a part of this, and in any amount. Everybody that contributes is going to get their name on this little placard, if you will, that I'm going to have put up on the back that says this vehicle is part of a crowdfunded hurricane and weather science project thanks to the following supporters. And it'll be like Bob Smith, Jack Delaquat, whatever. Right? Man, I could just make up names, can't I? But seriously, we're going to put your names on there. It doesn't matter if you put in $10 or $1,000. Everybody's going to be created, well, we hope so, treated equal. I'm citing the Declaration of Independence here all of a sudden. I think that's where that's from, right? You can tell I get excited about this, and I don't have a script. Everyone will be treated equal because I appreciate the fact that anybody at all cares enough about what I do to make it possible. So the link to this post, it is a public Patreon post. There it is right there. Will be in the description of today's video. There's a week left, roughly. Well, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I forgot I was gone for a couple of days. My week is different than your week. But Monday's the deadline. I want to assemble the funds and see what we got. And it would be great to walk in. Just one more time, will bring me on. It would be great to walk in to the Toyota or maybe the Ford dealer here and just have my bank wire over the total amount. Sure. But if we just get enough for a down payment on a lease and really get it under control, it'll be our vehicle, a crowd-funded vehicle. We did this together. So the opportunity is definitely still there if you want to get involved. And if you can't and it's financially tough right now, look, I get it. Just the fact that you're watching this video and maybe you share it with somebody else or you appreciate what I'm doing, you give it a thumbs up or a notification bell so you know in the future that I've done something, that helps too. It really does. It's great to have you along for this ride that we have been doing. Some of us have been with it for literally the full 20 years plus, and it's fantastic. All right, that is it from me for today. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thanks for watching. I'm Mark Stott of HurricaneTrack.com. That's the site anyway. I'll talk to you again sometime tomorrow.